Hello and welcome to the Power Pod. I'm your host, Matthew Cohen, and today I have the pleasure of welcoming American media personality Adelle Nazarian onto the show. Now, Adelle, you've been on Fox News, CNN, Breitbart, and today you're here with me. So I'd like to start off by thanking you for joining me here today.
Thank you. Great to be on with you, Matthew. Congratulations on your podcast. And really enjoy speaking with you. And there's a lot we're going to cover today across the spectrum.
Yeah. It's been a while, so it's great to be back on with you. We already had a super packed show as it is, as you've said, but unfortunately we do have to start on some pretty tragic news. So Charlie Kirk was murdered on September the 10th. For those who may not know who he is exactly, he's a prominent American conservative political commentator, student activist. He was the founder of Turning Point USA, and it was during one of his events at Utah University where he was tragically murdered in front of a crowd of upwards of 3,000 people, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he was
I myself
assassinated.
did not know Charlie. Yeah. I myself did not know Charlie, but Adelle, you are probably a lot closer to it. You know, you've moved in those media circles that are a little bit closer to Charlie. So I'd love to know, what are your thoughts on what happened? Take it away.
I did know him. He was a friend. We worked together in the past as well. And he was a very, very good man. And I am just devastated for him, for his wife, for his two kids. I don't know if you knew this, but during the speech he was giving, his daughter heard the sound of the gunshot and she was scared. And so instinctively, she was running towards her dad and she was stopped and she never got to say goodbye. I mean, it's crazy. Matthew, I have to tell you, he's only been he said things that I didn't always agree with. And that's the beauty of freedom of speech. I admired him for his staunch morals, his Christian values, and just the value system underlying that he abided by. And I have to say, the reaction to his death, his assassination by certain members of society is honestly very beyond alarming. Just because people think differently than him, they were celebrating his death. And what this does to me is it shows a collapse of compassion, of honor, and basic decency in our civilization. I mean, Matthew, if you want to look at it, even historically looking at it, in war, there were codes that held. The knights fought under chivalry, right? The samurai under Bushido, Indians under Dharma Yudra, Greeks under Timet, Muslims under Siyar. In the Nordic regions, the Drengskvar. I mean, there was something that even when facing the enemy, and make no doubt about it, there's no doubt about it, we're in the midst of a civilizational and cultural war. There was still respect given to the enemy once they were defeated or once they lost their life. And that was the absolute opposite of what happened here. And Charlie honestly embodied, courage. And he wasn't a man of violence. He his weapons were his conviction, reason, and his faith, honestly. And that really bent people out of shape who were ideologically opposed to him, because when he faced opponents, he didn't oppose them with hatred. He used clarity. He used the unshakable belief that guided him in the image of God. And at the end of the day, this patriot and this true warrior, right, of spirit, honestly, this is in his death. And I'm so sorry, but I'm going to say this, in his living, he was very famous, but in his death, they made him a martyr. And I guarantee you there's going to be tens of millions of people rewatching his videos, rewatching everything that he said, and it will activate a lot of minds to be indoctrinated away from the kind of hateful thinking that they've been fed to believe. And I think that's, unfortunately, he's more powerful maybe in his death now than he was even in living. And I just wish his family so much grace and so much peace. And I just don't even want to begin to imagine what they're going through. So thank you
Thank you,
for
Adele.
mentioning.
I couldn't have phrased it any better myself. And something that really resonated with me that you said was about the codes of honor. Many people like to paint Charlie as having been some sort of radical. And I have two responses to that. First of all, even if he was, there's no reason to murder someone because you disagree with their opinions. It's still completely unacceptable. And secondly, were there some things that people disagreed with? Sure. But that did not make him a radical. He was a very much mainstream conservative man. I've seen his videos. I've seen his campus debates. He was not a divisive figure. And beyond that, he never resorted to mudslinging, to name calling. In fact, he was the opposite. He was somebody who reached across the aisle and said to people on the other side, let's talk this out. So yeah, what you have said certainly resonates, and it's incredibly sad to see this sort of situation. But I guess my big question for you now, Adele, is what do you think the repercussions of this are? Especially on podcasters, especially on people who might be in a similar shoes to what Charlie was.
I think this is very scary. It's very alarming. I thought about it. I took pause. I couldn't believe my eyes when I was first sent that video by another friend, a mutual friend. And the first thing I thought was, my God, no one is safe anymore. And I think
Right.
what this is going to do is it's going to have a two-pronged effect, right? One is that there will be probably more people who are empowered, arguably in, ideologically opposed circles that will feel more empowered and emboldened to maybe go and carry out horrible crimes. And I hope that's not the case. The second, though, parallel path to that as a result of this assassination, Charlie's assassination, is it's going to also cause the Trump administration and America to clamp down, and a lot more surveillance, a lot more, deployment of forces that can protect people. This is a result of it. This is a result of it. And I think that once they find out who carried out this horrific tragedy, there's going to be, unfortunately, as a result of it, maybe a negative impact on people of that same group, whatever it may be. I don't know if if they're a radical in a left wing ideology. I don't know if it's an Islamist. I don't know if it's a radical Christian. I don't know if it's someone Jewish. I highly doubt it's someone from a strong religious background. To be honest with you, um, I think anyone who is a person who walks in the image of God, honestly, wouldn't do what this person did, but we will find out soon enough. But I think, yes, people should use caution. I don't want it to turn into a situation which is what seems is attempting to be done. People are being silenced by fear. Literally, they're being forced into silence because of their fear. But I would say everyone should be cautious and mindful of what they're saying, because the media is excellent at taking sound bites and cutting out. We saw with President Trump. We saw his Charlottesville speech where it was completely butchered and taken out of context, where he said there are very fine people on both sides, where he never meant the people who were carrying out the crimes. That was never what he said. And the media butchered his statement to present it in the way they wanted to. So just be mindful that the media is watching you, especially if you have a larger platform, and everything that you say can be manufactured and repurposed to hurt you and make you a target.
Of course, I think that's incredibly wise advice. So thank you for that, Adele. So, of course, the news cycle has been incredibly busy. And one of the big topics right now is the incredibly heated race for the New York mayor election. So, Adele, this is a very interesting situation because we've all of a sudden seen how a far left candidate, Zohran Mamdani, seems to be emerging as this clear frontrunner. And during his campaign, We've seen him express very strong anti-Israel sentiment, which is highly contrasted from the Trump administration and where they stand. We've also seen him make a lot of broadly socialist promises, such as building public supermarkets and creating this free bus transportation system. I don't know how that's going to work,
None of it's free.
but
you exactly.
exactly, it's going to have to be run using some kind of costs. But why is it that you think that this candidate, who really does seem to be the most radical one left in the race, is doing so well to get so much traction?
That's a great question. I think people are so emotionally driven these days that they've, as a result of also the university systems, indoctrination, you want to call it, policies, they want them to stop asking questions. They want them to stop questioning everything. They're emotionally driven. What's their bottom line? What's going to make them help them feel better? And Mamdani is winning because he's turned pain into politics. New Yorkers, you've seen the cost of living in America. It's gone up. New Yorkers are desperate under the weight of rent, food, transit costs, right? And Mamdani has made affordability his gospel, so to speak. Freeze rents, government run groceries, buses you don't pay for. It's radical, but for the everyday layperson, it's simple and it's visceral. And that's why, his fiery stance also on Israel and Gaza, it electrifies the younger, very online, bloc, this generation who they want disruption more than moderation, right? They've been fed to, rail against the system, rage against the machine. And that machine is a different target based on the ideological purview that you're basically coming from. And he's using both grievances and energy to pivot it into a direction that's helping him. That's it. It's always the number one issue at state level, local level, and federal government level politics is making affordability your message. That's what it's about, and that's what he has. He has basically made a central, focus of his campaign.
Right. That's really interesting that you bring that up, because I think that a lot of people who are outsiders, myself included, would look at this and think, wow, are these New Yorkers becoming so radicalized? But then again, like you say, affordability, cost of living, that factors in. So it's really interesting to hear that. But on that note, Adelle, it seems like a lot of his policies and promises and stuff seems to be dealing with national politics, So when you're talking about Israel Gaza, that's foreign policy out of his jurisdiction, and even like these economic promises.
But is
So
it
do you
out of his jurisdiction? Sorry.
well, I guess he's got the influence. But
You
at
want to
least
know
from
why?
a lawmaking standpoint,
Yeah.
I mean, these are national policies. These are not local
Matter.
policies.
Doesn't matter. Want to know why? Because the majority of everyday Americans and New Yorkers, a lot of them are, they're American citizens, ones who can vote, hopefully. But that's the law of the land. But what he's doing is, again, he's appealing to sentiment. People don't understand, for the most part, the way politics and law works. Look at the demographics, right? There's a majority of Muslims, let's say leftist Jews, groups that typically have it ideologically, united. The left wing, let's say the green-red axis, as they call it. There are people who are diametrically opposed to Israel who happen to be of the Muslim faith, and literally it has come down to that, unfortunately, that if you're Muslim, you're anti-Israel, and it's so upsetting to see that, because that's the only place, honestly, where all these different faiths are able to coexist, including, members of the LGBTQ community, without being persecuted. But that's why it resonates. They don't understand that he is speaking at a national political level that he has no real say in affecting. But it helps people think that it translates into what's going to happen in their neighborhoods. So it's that. And it's also the fact that I think he's signaling to the potential to have a even higher political, run in the future. So he's trying to lay the platform right now. So down the line in 10, 20, whatever years, when he decides to, let's say, run for higher office, if he gets that far, people can look back and say, wow, look at his platform. We want to vote for him.
Right, that's really interesting. So he could actually be playing the long game. But then my other question, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I think so. I really do.
Okay, interesting. My other question on this point is that you did mention that it seems like almost like a lot of people don't really know what they're voting for. So do you think that there's basically a lot of voter education that needs to happen?
Of course. Absolutely. The problem is politics has become so toxic of a word and such a polarizing word that many people just don't want to be politically engaged. I don't know if now that what has transpired with Charlie, with Irina, oh my God, Irina also being executed with a pocket knife. This young lady who came to America for a better way of life.
Are we speaking of the Ukrainian refugee who was murdered on the bus?
That's right. That's right. She was butchered. Yeah. And just these two tragedies striking right within on American soil, within days of each other. This is definitely we're looking at honestly something needs to change, and I think people are maybe going to be politically more activated. But no, typically people just want to stay away from politics because of how divisive it is and how toxic it's become. But I think you cannot destroy or change a system if you don't first understand it. That's why, even look at the workplace, right? Before someone becomes these parents who are truly raising their kids for success, let's say they own companies. Yeah, you can hand it over to your kid and have them ruin the whole company because they don't understand every single brick and mortar piece of it from start to finish. Successful parents will take their children, make them start by being dishwashers, cleaning the bathrooms, scrubbing the floors, let's say, right? And then building their
Right.
way up to being, the clerk, secretary, managing finances, getting up. Then you can be the CEO, the executive, whatever it is. But you have to be able to get your hands dirty. You have to be willing to get in there and understand every single nook and cranny of that corporation that you're going to one day, someday be inheriting to run. And I think that people who think they understand politics, they don't, because they don't have the basic principles of understanding the difference between national versus federal politics. And that's a very important point that you just laid out there.
Right. So let's talk a bit of strategy, Adele. So something that I really wanted to highlight, right, is
Mm-hmm.
that we did see quite a few prominent polls come out in the past week. We saw the New York Times Siena, we saw Emerson, we saw Quinnipiac. And what seems to be going on is that if we look at the timeline, Mamdani seems to be gaining support the entire time. I mean, a lot of these polls, we do need to understand, have very small sample sizes. So if we look at Quinnipiac, it's just under 1,000 people. There are a few others, such as Public Policy, which are only around like 500. But we're still seeing a general trend where Mamdani is well within the double digits ahead of his closest
Yeah.
rivals. And so I'd actually like to ask you, Adele, do you see any way back into the race for the likes of an Andrew Cuomo?
Honestly, here's what I think has to happen. Putting on my political analysis hat strategically.
Great.
Curtis Sliwa obviously is a long shot, right? Um, I think that Eric Adams obviously is also a long shot, obviously. But what I believe will help if people are really looking to defeat Mamdani, then I think Mayor Adams has to drop out of the reelection. I think he needs to endorse Andrew Cuomo, which will give a significant boost. And I think that Curtis Sliwa remaining in the race will also obviously take, the votes away. But I think between Cuomo and Adams, if one of them has to drop out, I think it should be Adams, and he should really put his weight behind Cuomo. And I think that will be a very, very important and big boost for Cuomo to defeat Mamdani. You want to up the ante a little more? Sliwa drops
Yeah.
out and endorses Cuomo, which you won't do. But you're splitting the vote here, right? And I think that when
Right.
it comes down to it, Adams dropping out hurts Mamdani the most because it unites diverse moderates and minority voters under Cuomo mostly, and also some of those votes will also go to Sliwa, Curtis. So that's what I think needs to be done. Putting ego away, which is tough in politics, but putting your state first, if they really believe in that, that's the way to do it.
Right. I think that's incredibly great strategic advice because, believe it or not, if we take a look at these polls here, we do have the ability to filter through the polls where Adams drops out.
Okay.
And as soon as he drops out, it's just like you said, Adele. Again, we're looking at very small sample sizes, like 500 people, 1,000 people, but look how many more votes Cuomo gets. And we even have some polls where Cuomo actually gets ahead of Mamdani, and that's still with Sliwa in the race. But Adele, do you reckon that Sliwa should actually consider dropping out as well? I know you said that he probably won't.
Can you do me a favor? Can you run this just showing Adams in the race and Sliwa dropping out and just seeing if those numbers will what they show? I'd love to see that.
All right. So we don't have a situation where Adams remains in and Sliwa drops out, but we can actually show a head-to-head with Mamdani and Cuomo. I'm not sure if that maybe helps, Adele.
Yeah, I mean, technically they would need to have Sliwa in the race anyway.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. But even if we take a look at these, I mean, it's not very encouraging either way. I don't know if I entirely believe that Mamdani would get over 50%. We've never seen...
Do you remember the 2016 election? I was actually covering it. I was traveling on the road. Polls said Hillary Clinton was everything pointed to Hillary Clinton. She lost. The polls are not honest. But in this particular case regarding Mamdani, I think he is I think he's most likely to win considering what's happening. I really, really do.
Wow.
So now
Wow, that's really interesting to hear. Very few people are so honest about it. So it's very insightful to hear you actually confirm your belief. Out of interest, Adele, do you reckon that there is a situation where if Cuomo dropped out and Sliwa stayed in, he would have a better opportunity to beat Mamdani? Or do you think Cuomo really is the best guy for the job?
No, it's Cuomo. I don't think Curtis Sliwa would win, to be honest with you. I hate to say it. You can try to simulate it. Mamdani versus Sliwa. Let's see it. No.
Yeah. Again, it's pretty narrow. Unfortunately, we've only got the option of taking out Cuomo, taking out Adams. Actually, let's take out Cuomo just to see what happens. I wonder if Adams will beat Sliwa. Yeah. These polls are actually pretty. It's interesting. I mean, it's kind of all over the place because there's certain polls where Adams beats Sliwa by quite a lot. I see here this Gotham poll, it's 28% to 12. But then look at Harris X.
I'll tell you
19 to 25. Yeah.
It's because New York, California, New Jersey, these are very increasingly blue states, left-leaning states, right? And in a head-to-head with, a Republican like Sliwa, who has his own views that are seen as controversial, obviously. I think that he is less likely to be victorious than someone who has the big D in front of their name on the ballot.
Right. That does actually make a lot of sense. And it's funny how much that label matters because I mean Eric Adams is probably the most conservative Democrat, if we could call him that. And
Yes.
Cuomo himself is
Blue
definitely
collar.
a right.
Right.
Exactly. And I mean Cuomo I would say is you can always correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say he's pretty centrist. He's definitely not this left leaning or radical kind of candidate. So it's
No,
pretty
they're
interesting. So I guess according to what you're saying, the ideal situation, if we can just take it back to Mamdani versus Cuomo, would be like you said, Adams drops out, and then Sliwa's also just got to read the writing on the wall.
I think he's going to stay in it though because he's not giving up on politics, and he would see that as a signal of defeat to his party. Um, I do
Wow.
think though, harkening back to what you said previously about the label has effect, Democratic label, 100%. But I think that's changing too. I think more people are increasingly becoming disenchanted with, and have been for the past, I'd say, since Donald Trump became president in 2016, increasingly disenchanted with the Democratic Party because its value system has been exposed, especially with the progressive wing of its base that has been honestly the biggest disruptor of the true underlying, let's say, principles of what the party once stood for. So let's see how this all plays out. But I have a feeling it's not going to be very positive. I mean, I have to say something also. If you look at what's happening in Europe, okay, actually, we'll get to that probably. I'd love to talk about it at some point, but we should talk about what's happening in Europe and juxtapose it against what's happening in America, right? Mamdani
Okay.
is essentially, with his views, kind of a anyone who has understood history and is looking at what's happening culturally and politically in Europe will wake up and see that Mamdani exudes those same exact ideology, those same exact thoughts, and it's incompatible with the way America is supposed to be run. So um, they're voting for him. He's most likely going to win based on how everything is going currently. But let's see how it all plays out. I hate to say I told you so.
Right. So we've got some pretty big calls there. So straight up, it looks like, at least if we can summarize your view, Mamdani's in it to win it. Cuomo has an outside chance, although not a very likely chance. And
He has a
otherwise, basically,
large chance.
okay. But then, of course, as we've kind of rehashed, Adams and Sliwa are just wasting their time.
You know what it is? At the end of the day, it's never a waste of time because they have their own goals long term. Even if Mr. Sliwa doesn't believe he'll win, Mr. Adams doesn't think he'll win re-election. Um, this isn't the end of the road for them. So there's a benefit for them to also stay in, and that's part of the reason why Nikki Haley stayed in as long as she did in the presidential race, even though she knew she technically wouldn't win the nomination. There's always something bigger at play behind the scenes that the public isn't aware of.
Right. So let's zoom out to the national picture for a moment. So, the last time you and I were chatting on the phone, you brought a really interesting topic to my attention, which is that President Donald Trump decided to donate his family Bible to the Museum of the Bible. And during the handover ceremony, he did speak quite a lot about bringing religion back to America and ensuring that the nation grows stronger through this. So, could you tell me a little bit more about the donation, what actually went down, and why is it so significant?
Absolutely. So on September 8th, 8 is a powerful day too, President Trump announced his family Bible would be donated to the Museum of the Bible. It's the same Bible that he used at his inauguration, actually. And this was, classic Trump, turning symbolism into strategy, of course, but also this is a huge message that it's a rallying cry, honestly, that this is a country of faith. America is a country of faith, principled with Judeo-Christian value system, and is a time to return back to those roots. America has gotten away from that, right? People can try to say they're secular. They can try to say that they're, um, you know, they don't believe in God, whatever it is. At the end of the day, people will always, even if you remove religion out of the equation, right? People will always find a way to turn a person, a concept, an inanimate object, something else to replace what once was, let's say, God and religion and faith. They will find a way to replace it, honestly. And you have to kind of think, what's going to replace religion? If you look at what's happening, over across the ocean, you're going to see that the Christian value system maybe is arguably being replaced by a Muslim value system, and what comes along with that. And so America
We're
and
talking about Europe, right? Um,
Europe, yeah,
just
exactly,
for those who
exactly.
may not be geographical aware, across the
Yeah,
ocean is Europe.
well, that ocean, yeah, exactly, exactly, the Atlantic Ocean. So, it's it was very strategic. He's elevating religion again, and he wants it to be once again part of you know America's governing identity. And I think that's really something that I applaud him for. I applaud him for that. Why is it okay for other nations and other countries to stick to their guns, to stick to their values, and basically push their own religion in their own nations? But every time America tries to do something to go back to its roots, let's say in one way or another, it's demonization. Um, it's the hypocrisy at the core of all of this. And the reason why I will say this: if you don't like America, if you despise America, you shouldn't be there. Don't come to our country and try to bash it and destroy it. There's freedom of speech, but and again, they should be able to exercise their freedom of speech without fear of being executed. This is insane. But at the end of the day, and I'm sorry, I just have to, get this out there for whoever's watching to understand this.
Of course.
Um, you shouldn't be in a country whose values you don't agree with, and you shouldn't try to become part of the fabric of that nation if you cannot assimilate to and respect the laws of that land. And that's it. That's it.
You're right.
Yeah.
I think that's a very logical point, which really seems to be overlooked a lot in the modern age. But do you think that a lot of what Trump is seeing in Europe, a lot of the migration crisis that's going on, this sort of Islamic wave that's happening, do you reckon that that's sort of the warning sign that basically set him off, that said, listen, we've got to take charge before we lose our national identity in the process of all of this?
Absolutely. I think President Trump is layering faith onto the security debate. And domestically, he's, fusing law and order together with border control, and he's using a pro-faith umbrella. And faith, faith can be whatever your faith is, but it's something that promises stability and civic cohesion, right? And at the end of the day, you have to realize America is a Christian nation with Judeo-Christian value system. And I think that, you can be a Jew, a Christian, a Buddhist, a Hindu, a Muslim, a Baha'i, Zoroastrian. I can name so many other faiths that as long as you are, reform minded and don't believe that your faith should become the dominant and presiding faith over the already, determined faith of the land, then you are more than welcome, as long as you're not sowing chaos, right? And that's
Of
why I
course.
think 10, 15 years ago. I was speaking about how the red-green axis in Europe, it's these two like-minded at the end of the day, even though they're diametrically opposed when it comes to value systems. I'm just going to see this again, and I completely condemn this, and I don't think it should be this way. But look, whatever your personal, persuasion, whoever you happen to love, and what your sexual orientation is, okay, just that's your thing. It should be respected, but people who are members of the LGBTQ community who are literally going to live under these very Islamic countries, right? That would essentially be arrested, who would be executed, who would be tried for, you know, for what is the word for it? Going against the will of God and be punished for it, right? Here they are fighting for these same people under the guise of freedom when they are going to be the first to go in a society that is governed and run by their underlying principles and value system. And that's exactly the rallying cry that President Trump is answering. He's seeing what's happened in Europe. He's seeing the loss of its identity. He is seeing the collapse of a very important part of Western civilization. And honestly, America is the last stand. And I think that's why, in a sense,
Sure.
not saying this is the case, and in a sense, America, through this presidency, is sort of not isolating, but kind of isolating itself from the disaster that's looming everywhere else, to protect the people who are in the country and to protect whatever is left for the sake of the future. That's what I think is happening here. And I think that him donating the family Bible to the Museum of the Bible was a very powerful, spiritual, practical, and logical way of securing America's bloodline in terms of not literally bloodline, meaning the ground, the earth, because there is figurative blood running through the earth as in the soil of American land. And that is a beautiful cacophony of different religions, different faiths, different, all of that under the same umbrella of one principled value system and law and order. And so that's what I think he's been doing there.
Makes a lot of sense. But there are actually certain adversaries, unfortunately, who
Of
do not
course,
fall under the umbrella that you spoke about.
they don't.
And one of these outliers happens to be South Africa.
Yeah, of course.
So, as we've seen over the past few months, if not years in actual fact, US South Africa relations have been deteriorating at a rate that no one really wants to see. But recently, we saw the US amp up the pressure. We saw the approval of the US South Africa Bilateral Relations Review Act by the House Foreign Affairs Committee, which essentially means it's going to be passed along Congress and could be passed into law. So, in your opinion, Adele, do you reckon that there is a very strong likelihood that this bill would be passed into law? Or do you think it's more of just sort of a talking point, something that's kind of a warning sign to South Africa?
Wow, we spoke about this something similar a while back, but this is a new development. On July 22nd, the Bilateral Relations Review Act, called the House Foreign Affairs Committee House Resolution 2633, right? It was passed. That's real momentum. Absolutely. It passed, yes. It was approved by the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Now it has to, clear the House. The big obstacle, which is next, is the Senate. That one is a little bit trickier, but I think it's doable. What I think, of course, this is in response to Washington's concern that the lawmakers in South Africa are cozying up with Russia and China and dragging Israel to the ICJ, the Criminal Court of Justice. And they're even flirting with the whole Iran and Hamas narrative, right? And this is very diabolically opposed to what America stands for. I think that if people have to understand this, Israel and America's relationship, no matter how many ups and downs, ebbs and flows, it goes through, it's still an inextricably bound relationship. America and Israel are really eternal allies. And I don't think anyone is going to be able to do anything about it unless there's a huge shift away from America's value system and underlying principles as seen by the founding fathers. That said, I believe that if Pretoria ends up doubling down and he continues with his foreign policy, posturing and cozying up with America's, let's say, adversaries, then it is very likely that the bill 2623 passes the House this fall. And frankly, the Senate, confirmation, whether it gets passed in the Senate, will really calibrate on, AGROA leveraging this whole thing, and whether businesses, business groups will be warning against any blowbacks to the U.S. supply chains. But I have to say, even that fits into President Trump's pro-America, America First narrative, where this tariffs trade war wants to push everything back to America first. And you know better than I do, is there really a big chunk of American imports coming from South Africa? I see in Europe, there's a lot of South African, amazing produce coming in, but I don't think America has as much.
So if we're talking about the proportion going towards America, from the American perspective, South African imports to America make up a very small proportion. But if we look at it from the South African perspective, the US remains South Africa's largest trade partner. And what's particularly unique about the relationship with the US is that South Africa is actually a net exporter. So for viewers who may not know, net exporter means that South Africa exports more goods to the US than they import. And so they're making more money from the US than the US is making from South Africa. And this is incredibly dangerous because basically, Adelle, what's happening here is, I think a lot of these South African politicians, they kind of carry this narrative saying that, well, if we get rid of the US relationship, it's okay. We'll just replace them with BRICS. We'll just replace them with Russia, China, some emerging economies. But the problem with that, right, is that those countries are also looking to be net exporters, like South Africa. They're not going to be able to replace America as a customer.
Africa could potentially implode the economy. It'll be worse than a recession. It'll be horrible for the people who are living there. They're going to see prices skyrocket. I mean, this is a very dangerous, dangerous game. And
Right, it is. And what makes it even worse, Adelle, this is the crazy part, right? For an incredibly long time, the South African economy's been growing, but at a shrinking rate. And the last report that I saw, GDP growth was at about 0.8%. It's almost
horrible.
Stationary. It's almost going nowhere. But Adelle, what I'm really interested to know, right, is we see what the politicians say and the governments say, but what is your feeling on the ground? Do you think that Americans are feeling a lot of animosity towards South Africa? Do they perhaps maybe split their view of the government versus the people? What's the sentiment on the ground?
To be frank with you, I think most Americans are really concerned about their own bottom lines. I think they are just concerned with what's happening within their borders. Of course, there's groups of Venezuelans, Cubans, of Argentinians, of South Africans, of people from all different diaspora communities that are in America, living, thriving, living their version of the American dream. And of course, within those mostly, I think they're more attuned with what's happening in their, let's say, ancestral country. So among them, it's divided also, but that's no longer what their focus is on because they're trying to build life in America. I think if South Africa really wants to demonstrate the concern that citizens should have about their nation and their own bottom line and their future for their children and themselves and the future generations, is vote them out. get a democratically elect someone who will be better suited to transform the relationship that is currently occurring between the U.S. and South Africa, and even if it's for one term, even if it's just some kind of reprieve from the honestly the decline that's occurring there, it's up to every single person there. And I really hope that the South African people have the courage to really rise up and do that for themselves and for the future of their nation.
A powerful message, Adele. And yes, I think it's actually such a relevant point because it's something that people in South Africa, especially influencers and political analysts, commentators, are always pushing home, saying people
Yeah,
need to get out and vote. And the reality is, yes, they are managing to get that sort of change. It's just not happening fast enough. You know, the president's party, the ANC, they lost their majority in the past election, but they're still the leaders of the coalition.
of course.
And so I guess time will tell how long they'll actually be in the governing coalition. So that's going to be really interesting. But Adele, if we take a look at everything we discussed today, you know, from the US, New York, Trump, South Africa, and we just think about the globe at large and where we're headed,
Yeah.
what is your outlook? Do you feel optimistic about the future, pessimistic, or somewhere in the middle?
Both. I think
Hmm.
there's tremendous reason to be optimistic, and I think there's equal reason to be skeptical and worried. Um, but I think the defining factor and what makes the biggest difference is what you're willing to do to push the future in the direction that you want to see. And I think we can talk about this another time, but AI, that's one part of it. Um, there's just so much that has been happening under the surface that everyday people have been so unaware of, just in their kind of coma of unawareness, being indoctrinated, if you want to call it, in different directions, and being taught and trained not to question everything, to get rid of and to kind of cut off their critical thinking mechanisms. And I really, really hope that that can be brought back up again. I hope that the civilizational consciousness can be elevated. And I hate to sound like a preacher here because I'm not, but I want to appeal to everyone's soul, to the heart and soul, um, in a practical, emotional way, where they kind of have to have a reckoning with internally and to see, what does this really do to me on the inside? Does it make me feel at peace? Is this something that I can, rest with, knowing that I am making this decision that will impact my children's and future grandchildren's and generational legacy, that they're going to be inheriting what I am doing today and how it will have reverberations across different timelines? That's the question that I think everyone should be asking, and to be less selfish. Um, and I think that they'll be happier that way. I really do. Because I think that, you know, whatever your decision is regarding making, creating a family, for example, or whatever it is, I think people have been consumed by selfishness, and doesn't mean to be a come on martyr and to go and like put yourself out and, burn yourself put yourself on fire the way some of these people have unbelievably, I'm sorry to say, just horrifically done, but to have a more spiritual awakening and opening their third eye. So that's kind of the message. So I am equally optimistic as I am cautious and worried.
That was a very nuanced answer. Thank you for that. And yeah, lastly, Adele, where can people find you if they want to follow you?
Thank you so much. I am across all social media platforms at Adelle Naz, ADELLENAZ. And thank you for that, Matthew. I appreciate
Of
that.
course. Well, I've followed you with great interest. And I definitely advise other people to do the same. Thanks to everybody who's watching. Please make sure to follow Adelle for more valuable insights. And yeah, Adelle, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking the time. And I look forward to us chatting again sometime soon, hopefully.
Me too. Thank you for everything you're doing, and I'm very grateful to you, and so glad to have your friendship, and looking forward to speaking with you soon.
Thanks, Adele. Means a lot, and I definitely have to say likewise. Thanks to everybody for tuning into this episode of the show. Please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you'd like to check out more content like this. Until next time, I'm Matthew Cohen, and this is the Power Pod.